wrong. Hi, this is Tony Kent, and this is another episode of Tony Kent Writes and Cross-Examines. Today, putting herself into the metaphorical witness box is an author who has appeared 6 times on the Sunday Times bestseller list. As somebody who has never even probably held a copy of it, let alone appeared in it, I am extremely jealous, but also extremely lucky to have her here. It is C.L.TAYLOR, the author of a host of standalone psychological thrillers, 6 of which Sunday Times bestsellers, 1 of which was in the Richard and Judy Book Club last year. And Callie, how are you? It's very nice to see you.
Hi, Tony. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm good. Much happened since the weather's got a bit cheerier and sunnier. As I was saying to you before we started, I'm a bit behind on my current book, quite a lot behind on my current book, but my editor's being understanding because basically I'm spending half my day doing homeschooling now. So it's like I've suddenly got a part-time job. But other than that, we're coping all right.
Good. I'm pleased to hear it. Just to warn you, and for anyone else, I think there's a bit of a delay between us, so we may have to start saying things like Roger and over, so we know when the other one can speak. But I'll try not to jump in with new things after I've finished speaking. Anyway, just jumping straight in there with a new thing after I finish speaking. Yes. So I was just looking at your website. Which I think I was telling you earlier, I'm equally jealous of as I am your bestsellers list, because it's an incredible website. It tells me so much about you. You write psychological thrillers, as I'm sure everyone here knows. Your current one is Strangers, and Strangers was, I think, in its first week, despite the lockdown, managed to hit once again the Sunday Times bestselling list.
Yeah. The first part week, it was like something like number 16. But then the first full week of sales, it managed to squeak in at number 10. I really thought this, having had 5 Sunday Times bestsellers in a row, I thought this time there's no way. I mean, one of the supermarkets that was going to take it suddenly decided not to take any new books in April. So we were down to 2 supermarkets. and most people were staying at home. It was right at the beginning of the lockdown, and I thought, who's going to buy a copy? So I'm hugely grateful to everybody that did, because number 10, couldn't be happier with that.
Well, it's wonderful news, isn't it, to see that, because I think I brought Powerplay. My 3rd book came out a week after yours, or it may have been 2 weeks. I think it was a week. And yeah, we were suffering from the same problem, you and I. We were effectively shouting into the wind because the world had closed down. So to achieve that, I mean, it says something about your about the loyalty of your readers, which in turn says something about the quality of the books that preceded it. So I mean, it obviously deserved its place. So which one of your books was the first one to get that coveted status as a Sunday Times bestseller?
So the first one was The Lie, which was actually my 2nd book. The Accident was my debut. There was a weird thing when that came out because Tesco didn't report the figures or reported part figures, or there was some problem with the figures. So the full week of figures for The Accident wasn't accurate. But yeah, The Lie went into a promotion in a supermarket, and yeah, that was the first one. In fact, it's my biggest selling book in terms of total sales, because it went to number 1 on Amazon as well, and it stayed there for 3 months, or in the top 5 for 3 months over the summer.
My God, it's amazing.
And I was lucky back then because not many publishers were doing 99p deals. It was just sort of Avon, HarperCollins, and a couple of others. So I think I got quite lucky, really. I sort of got in there before all the other publishers started reducing to 99p and getting books into the deals in the supermarkets and stuff. But yeah, my readers are very loyal, and I've noticed that the more books that I write, obviously the more my social media following increases, the more emails that I get. I think, like, you know, this business is a long game. I think, you know, if I'd had that first book that had gone massive, I would have a lot of pressure then to follow it up book for book by book. You know, everybody would be comparing it against that first best book. Whereas, you know, Strangers is book number 7, and you know, I've done, you know, I've done well to get in the Sunday Times bestseller list, but I'm not like a massive name. You know, if you ask somebody in the street, they won't have heard of me. But my readers are sort of following me along, and I'm gathering more with each book. And I guess that's the best way to have longevity in your career, really. So fingers crossed it continues.
No, it's a great thing, isn't it? It's a great not treadmill is wrong. It's a great road to be on, and it's great to have that following. And you say that, you know, you're not a big name and people wouldn't know you in the streets. I was contacted about 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, by somebody from school, and they contacted me I've not heard from this person for 25 years. Contacted me on Facebook to say, wonderful, you're writing, you're in that, you know, you're doing really well. That's wonderful. Can you get me a book signed by C.L.TAYLOR? So there was no mention of can I get a signed book from you, Tony? It was, you're in the crime writing world. Can you get me C.L.TAYLOR's book, please, and get her to sign it? So I think you might be a bigger name than you realise, Callie.
I love that.
Yeah, I was deeply offended.
Yeah, it does happen. Yeah, I bet you were. It is a weird one where people who haven't contacted you for years, when you have a book out, there's they do suddenly get in contact, and you do get quite a few people saying, I've got an idea for a book. Or I even had one of my postmen knock on the door once and say, I've written a children's book. I don't suppose you could look at it for me. I know who you are because I deliver your post, you know, whatever. And so I was all like, okay, awkward. But I don't do children's books, but email it to me and I'll tell you what I think, sort of thing. But yeah, it does amuse me. It's, you know, to us it's a job, but to other people it's a bit of a you know, sort of unusual kind of world, maybe.
Yeah. I was looking at your, just moving on, I was looking at your website. I think I mentioned to you at the beginning of this, which I'm very jealous about again, as I said. But one of the things that really intrigued me on your website, I didn't know that C.L.TAYLOR used to publish as C.L.TAYLOR and used to publish romantic comedies. And what your website says is that changed when you had an idea for a psychological thriller, basically when you gave birth to your son. I mean, that seems unusual. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I did, as myself, as C.L.TAYLOR, I had 2 romantic comedies published by Orion, and I was pregnant with my son, and I was entering a competition on the theme of writing the first chapter of a book on the theme of keeping a secret. And I was in a supermarket, and I was in a queue. And this thing happens sometimes, or it happened to me anyway when I was pregnant, where I'd get this kind of 1,000-yard stare. If I was doing something boring or something stressful, I just kind of sort of mentally drift off. And while I was in this queue in the supermarket, I just I heard this character's voice, and she said, coma, there's something soothing about the word, innocuous almost in the way it conjures up the image of a dreamless sleep. And I realized that this was a character telling me a story about a woman at her daughter's hospital bedside. Her daughter's in a coma, having deliberately stepped in front of a bus. And then the mum finds the daughter's diary that says, keeping this secret is killing me. So I just thought, oh, wow. I mean, literally, that has never happened to me before and has never happened to me since. So I'm guessing it's something about being pregnant that I sort of heard a character sort of thing. Yeah. So I went home, I wrote it down, I wrote the first chapter. I submitted to the Romantic Novelist Association competition. I think they were expecting more romantic stuff instead of this dark thing that I'd written. But it won. And And it won, and the organizer said to me, what's happening? What's going to happen afterwards? I said, I don't know. It was just, an entry to the competition. But then my second rom-com came out when my son was 6 weeks old. So I massively promoted it, and then my agent said, right, put together a synopsis and some chapters for a potential third book, and we'll see if we can get you another book deal. And sadly, well, actually not, as it turns out, my editor said she didn't want any more. So then I was left with no book contract, and I kind of thought my career was over. But then I thought back to this chapter that I'd written, and thought, I want to find out what happens in the rest of that story. At the time, S.J. Watson's Before I Go to Sleep had come out and was a massive worldwide phenomena. And Elizabeth Payne's Into the Darkest Corner was huge on Amazon, massive Amazon hit. And I just thought, I think psychological thrillers are going to be a big thing. Yeah. And so I wrote the rest of the book while I was on maternity leave. I'd plot it when I breastfed my son at night, just sort of sitting in the darkness thinking about what happened next. And then in the day, he had about 3 or 4 45-minute naps. And I'd get a notebook and just write. And I filled 2 notebooks with the story, typed it all up at some point, sent it to my agent. And she said, it's the best thing you've written. I'm going to send it out on submission. So, a weird combination of a competition, pregnancy, and losing my book deal led me to crime. And best thing I ever could have done.
It certainly seems to be, doesn't it? Because, you can't have that many best-selling books without it being the right thing to have done. And so, speaking of which, you've made a small move again, though, haven't you? Across, and you're now looking into, in addition to, not instead of, but in addition to, you're now looking at young adult books.
Yeah, the young adult thing came because I love the program Prison Break, the first series anyway, and.
The classic one series premise.
Watched it about. Yeah, exactly. It only works for series. Try and stretch it any longer, it doesn't work. And I watched this years ago, and I just thought, how interesting would it be if you had a program or a book with a group of kids in a kind of kids prison, and them trying to escape in the same way that they sort of try and escape in Prison Break. And that's how the idea initially formed for The Treatment, which was my first young adult thriller. But it's set in a slightly dystopian world where the government is into brainwashing people that don't do as they're told to make them model citizens and that sort of thing. And I wrote it because I just wanted to tell the story. And I sent the first 3 chapters to my agent and a synopsis, and she said, I'll see if I can sell it for you. And she did. She got me a deal with HQ, which is part of HarperCollins. I'm lucky in that Avon HarperCollins published my adult books and HQ HarperCollins published my young adult. So very understanding if I need an extension or I need some time. But then I got so busy with my adult books that I didn't have time to write the second book in the contract a year later. Yeah. So actually I wrote that, I think I wrote that in 2018. I did it for NaNoWriMo, the second book, The Island, which is a standalone separate book. It's about a bunch of kids who go on a survival weekend on a Thai island. They're in their teens, and their guide dies. And then all their worst phobias start to come true one by one. And it was originally an idea I pitched for my adult books. But my editor said, I'm not sure it's quite right. I'm not sure it sort of sits with your sort of other C.L.TAYLOR books. So then I proposed it to my young adult editor. And she was like, yeah, brilliant. And so I did the edits for that last year. I'm waiting for the copy edits, and then it's going to come out in January 2021. So, but it's exhausting trying to write 2 different books. So I think it will be a bit of a wait before I write any more, I think, because just writing one psychological thriller a year is enough for me.
I'm sure it must. That kind of thing must take it out of you emotionally as well as the actual act of writing it. I've just looked at the clock, We are 10 seconds away from 15 minutes. So I'm going to say, C.L. Taylor, thank you very much. The Island is coming out next year. Make sure you buy that, and make sure you buy Strangers. Thanks a lot.